the next game, I actually talked about in a lecture earlier, but not the whole game, just the very end. But now we're going to actually look at the whole game. And we're going to show you how people of different levels made people of lesser levels look pretty weak. This is Alekhine versus F.D. Yates. Now, first of all, looking at this game, it does look like a game that I would play if I was white. That last game, no. No, I wouldn't do any of that. None of that. I wouldn't have sacked my queen. I wouldn't play knight c6. I wouldn't play the Dutch. I wouldn't do any of that. Okay, and then he won because he's the world champion. And then this game, this looks like I was playing. Now you're talking. Okay. White in a queen's gambit. Great. I've had white in this position many times. Yeah, great. Beautiful. I've had white in this position. I've also played queen c2 here. Great. Okay, yeah, queen c, good. Queen c2 and rook c1. It's like I'm playing. Yeah. So here's what's happening is the players are playing the waiting game. The waiting game sucks. Let's play Hungry Hungry Hippo. Okay. Well, that's Simpsons. Now, the waiting game is black is going to take on c4 and then play knight to d5 and trade all the pieces. However, this bishop's on f1, so we're going to wait for the bishop to move, and then we're going to take on c4, and it's going to move again. And Alekhine's like, hey, why don't you take that pawn before I move my bishop? So he's playing rook c1 and queen c2. And if he wants to, he could play a3 and h3 and keep waiting for dc4. But okay, like Popeye, he had all he could stand, he can't stand no more. And then Yates is like, okay, great, now I can take that. Knight d5, trade all the pieces, agree to a draw. Now, when I'm white in a queen's gambit, and I've had very similar positions, I don't think I've had this position, but I might. And I don't like to play e4 because I like to use e4. Sometimes I mate my opponent, so if I had a pawn on e4, I couldn't do that. Or sometimes I play knight e4, sometimes bishop e4. And so Alekhine agrees. He plays knight e4. Great. And the idea is if you trade bishops, if black does, when white takes back, he's threatening queen h7 already. And also he's stopping more trades. Knight e4 stops the trades. And Yates played f5. Very anti-positional. Okay, weakening e6. The bishop is on the diagonal with the king. I don't like f5. Now, you don't get mate on h7. That's good. But you're giving up what color squares? What color?
The light squares.
Close. The dark squares. Yeah, you put all your pawns, you put your pawns on white squares. You can't protect the dark squares. The dark square bishops are going to get traded. I guarantee it. So you're left with this bishop. Frankly, terrible. Get ready, get set, terrible. That's, you know. And Karen's raising her hand. She's like, I never have a bad bishop on c8. It's never happened. Right?
It happens all the time.
Right. In a lot of queen pawn openings, with a lot of players, their queen bishop sits there and they're like, what'd I do wrong? Or in the French defense, etc. Right. This is a very common problem. f5 exacerbates that problem, making sure black can never do anything, that this bishop is just stuck here forever. Okay, so he trades the bishops, obviously, moves the knight back, doesn't play knight c3. White doesn't want to trade. White wants to keep all the pieces on the board, so black is strangling himself. b5, terrible. And he takes it, which is an unusual move, but it forces black to have no counterplay. Black's counterplay is at some point to play c5 or e5. It's not going to happen. It's not. Now, if this pawn was here, c5 and e5 would both be good. Now, you can't take with the e pawn, your f pawn's hanging. You got to take this way. That bishop's no good. You're not going to play c5 unless you have a magic pawn, then go to c5. And you're not going to play e5 because then you'll weaken all of your pawns and the f pawn's hanging. And it's not your turn. Okay, so castles. a5 I also don't like. And obviously, of these two pieces, which one is better for black? Which one does black like?
The knight.
The knight. The knight's controlling the dark squares. So white trades it. Okay, very suspicious playing a4, putting all his pawns on white squares with his bishop on c8. I mean, who's British, so what do you want? I was talking to Ginger GM yesterday. He said Yates is the greatest player who ever lived. No.
It's Michael Adams.
Exactly. Now, this is the kind of position that I would have with white if I was playing like a 1200 player. And then people would walk around and look and be like, why is Ben playing a 1200 player, number one? Number two, how come Ben's not at material? Like, it's equal material and the guy's 1200. The 1200 player is like, this looks like a draw. So everything's equal. He's 1200. Give him a break. Okay, now for Grandmaster, they would never have black in this position because there's one open file and white has it forever. And you can't protect e5. That's no good. And this is the worst bishop ever. So everything is the worst thing ever. Like black has no plan. It's not funny.
Isn't his name Frederick Dewhirst?
He's Dewhirst?
Yeah.
Is that what your point is?
He's Dewhirst.
Yeah, Dewhirst. Dewhirst.
That's his middle name.
Yeah, the truth hurts. Now, I've never shown this whole game, which is good because, pretty suspicious. But the end of the game, now you're talking. This is the part I do show. Not yet, but close. Okay, b4, double up on the bubble up. Bishop a6, knight e5, b8. Okay. f3, never play f3. Now, when you play f3 in this pawn structure, normally, there's two reasons. You're going to play e4 or you're going to play g4. In this position, neither one of those is the reason. The reason can only be known by Grandmaster Nigel Short. That was a hint. No, that wasn't a good. Was that a good hint? Did you like the hint?
He's going to get his king up.
So you like that hint?
Yeah. It was a good hint.
Oh, you're like, oh yeah, Short Timon. Okay, yeah. And if white moves his king up, maybe black can stop it, but I don't see how. So I've dominated the c file. My knight dominates your bishop. The only thing that's not is the kings are on the same square. And again, in the psychology study that was published today, this is the problem you have. You're like, wow, my rooks are good, rook c7. Wow, my knight is good, knight d7. Okay, and a grandmaster says, well, my king's not good, let's make my king good. And then they pretend they're playing bug house, take a piece from, make that piece good. Just keep making pieces good. You can't just do one thing, you got to do everything. So you got to make black's pieces terrible, which he did, and you have to make your own pieces better. You can't just leave one piece and be, yeah, that's okay. One piece bad is good. You make it better. Okay, and he blocks it up on the bubble up. Here he comes, walking down the street. Here comes his king. Black can't move at all. And again, just like in the last game, when white's rook was on g2 and bishop was on h1, this is not a position you would see today. This is a game you can learn from because white got the c file, white got the better minor piece, white got the better king. If grandmasters are playing today, they know this is going to happen. So before it happens, they don't do that. They wouldn't play a move like f5. I mean, after f5, my king can come here, my knight can come here. Trading on c5 gives me the c file. Putting all my pawns on white squares, my bishop can't do anything. Terrible. Okay, always play bishop f1. Okay, good. And now he wants to mate him on g7. Rook here, rook g7. Okay. Goes here. What's he going to do if white doubles?
Rook g8.
Rook g8. Okay. All right. So the king went up the board. The rooks went up the board. The knight hasn't moved in a long time. Very long time. So knight d7, what's the threat?
Knight f6.
Knight f6 check. Easy to stop except for one thing.
It's not easy.
Not easy to stop. So there is only one move that makes any sense at all.
King H8.
King H8. Now, knight F6, you can't take it because of rook H7 mate. You see what I'm saying? You want to take the rook. If the rook moves away, you take on G7. But Yates had it all figured out. He wrote a poem. Oh, wait, wrong Yates. He played rook F8. He said, ha-ha, you can't take on G7. I'll take the knight on F6. And Alekhine said, no talking. Okay. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, but he did it anyway. Now, if the black rook was on F8, which it's not, either rook, doesn't matter. Then I play rook H7 check, repeat, and then rook G7 mate, always repeat. So Alekhine finished the game, and I've lectured on this game before.
King E5.
King E5. Attacking the rook, I just said, if either rook goes to F8, you get mated. Probably you want to play rook F8. Either one. Otherwise, I take your rook. Now, Yates, even though it says he's Dewhirst, he found a way to avoid mate and not lose his rook.
He resigned.
He resigned. Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm going to take your rook and then mate you. Yeah. So that was a very modern kind of game from Alekhine. It wasn't like he sacked all his pieces and mated him or got a mating attack out of the opening. That was a positional brilliancy. Took the C file, took the dark squares, made his opponent's game bad, moved his king up the board. This is the way I like to play. I'm not sure I would have sacked a piece because I don't like sacking a piece. So sacked a piece at the end, there was like nothing to calculate. So rook F8 is made. So.